Well, the Competition Commission is going to start an inquiry into the fresh produce market next week. It's very important is to determine whether there are activities in the value chain that are impeding competition and maybe driving up prices. Who knows at this point? The focus will be on 5 fruits and 6 vegetables. Now, they include bananas, apples, pears, spinach, onions and cabbage. And if you tried to buy any fresh produce lately, how expensive it is. It's a big issue. Well, let's find out why the Commission is doing this. I'm joined by spokesperson Siyabulela Makunga from the Competition Commission. Sia, good to have you back with us on ENCA. So just let's start right at the beginning of this. Why are you investigating this as a commission? Where did this come from?
Well, thank you very much once more for having us. You put it correctly that one of the essential objectives of the investigation is that of examining whether there are any features, across the entire value chain that may impede, restrict, or distort competition. And why we're doing this, you are, and you would agree with me that the sector is undeniable the cornerstone of our economy, given its contribution to employment, the nutrition and welfare of all South Africans. So it was important for us that we understand the functioning of the fresh produce value chain and its features, so as to establish if there are any features in the sector that may be impeding competition and participation. And we're doing this, you would recall that in November 2021, the Commission had undertaken a study looking at the levels of participation and concentration with a particular focus, obviously, on the emerging sector. And our assessment has proved that there has been a large decline of farms in the sector. And this, it really left us concerned. And obviously, based on the complaints that we've received during COVID-19, most of them were really about increasing food prices. So having observed that fluctuation in price, because we've been monitoring prices, we felt that it was important for us to understand what are the key drivers of price increases in the fresh produce market.
So it's about supply and demand, isn't it? So if it was a case of, as you mentioned, Sia, during COVID, a lot of farms and small holdings that were producing this sort of produce would have closed down. That means there's less people, there's less organizations in the value chain, and you could end up in a situation where price fixing, for example, could be an issue at play here as well. Where do you start to investigate this? Because when we talk about produce value chains, there are a lot of steps involved, all the way from the farm to the transportation, the storage, the marketing, the selling, all the way to the shelf. Just how widespread and how wide-ranging is this investigation going to be?
Well, we're going to be looking to a number of issues, but just for the understanding and really scoping our work, we had identified about 3 themes, which obviously we're looking at the functioning of the value chain in terms of its efficiency. And in this area, we are emphasizing on the trading at the fresh produce market facilities. So we would like to understand what determination is made and how are those determinations made as to which facility is being utilized by which player in the fresh produce market. We want to look at issues of how the markets function in as far as key inputs are concerned. I'm talking about seeds, fertilizer. These are essential inputs that farmers use. But also we want to look at the obstacles that may face or confront farmers to enter, expand, and or participate in the fresh produce markets, whether there are any structural or systematic barriers to entry that are confronting the emerging sector. So those are the 3 themes that we've identified, but obviously our main objective is to understand the sector in its entirety. Hence, it is important that we make this call to stakeholders to respond to the statement of issues that we have issued yesterday when we launched the Fresh Produce Market Inquiry. And this is important for them because we want to work with the sector in understanding how the value chain works, what are the key drivers in terms of pricing, and we do wish to make this call that by the 2nd of May this year, would like all interested parties, including members of the public, to submit to the Commission their inputs in terms of responding to the statement of issues, which obviously highlight the areas of investigation.
Just very briefly, see a last question then. I understand we're talking about the value chain itself, all the way from the farms through transportation, logistics, etc. Just as briefly as you can, are you going to be investigating? Is this part of your scope? Is there room for this? Looking at the actual supermarket chains as well. I'm going to deliberately not mention any names, but I don't want to come across as though I'm targeting anything. But the big markets, the big shops, are you looking at the end price as well, or is it just a value chain leading up to the pricing on the shelf itself?
The value chain starts from farm to plate. We are going to be investigating the prices in terms of the producers, the retailers, the processors, the distributors, and also export markets. So we want to understand that entire value chain so as to be able to give answers as to why we have had these fluctuating price increases. Why are we having certain players in the sector pulling out of the industry? What could be the reasons that inform this high level of concentration?
And Siya, I'm going to say thank you once again for making time to us to unpack what is going to be an inquiry into the value chain of fresh produce. It's going to be very wide-ranging, quite a wide scope, but I think a lot of South Africans would agree that the cost of food really has gone up exponentially, and the Competition Commission now looking at the fresh produce element as well. So my thanks to Siyabulela Makunga from the Competition Commission.